A chilling scream pierces the foggy night at a remote English inn, where secrets lurk behind every locked door and a brilliant detective is about to unravel a web of deceit. Welcome to Poirot and the Murder at the Starfall Inn. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and let this suspenseful tale draw you in. If you're hooked on the mystery, subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us. Chapter 1. Arrival at the Starfall Inn Hercule. Poirot adjusted his immaculate moustache as the train rattled to a stop at the quaint station of Eldridge Hollow, a sleepy village nestled in the misty hills of rural England. It was a crisp autumn evening in 1932, with leaves swirling like whispered secrets in the wind. Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, had been invited to the Starfall Inn for what was promised to be a relaxing weekend retreat. "Ah, mon ami," he murmured to himself, stepping onto the platform with his small valise in hand. A little rest for the little grey cells, no? But one never knows what surprises await in these charming English countrysides. A horse-drawn carriage awaited him, driven by a grizzled old man named Jenkins, the inn's stable hand. "Evening, sir," Jenkins grumbled, tipping his cap. "Starfall Inn's just up the hill. Folks say it's named for the shooting stars you can see from the rooftop on clear nights. Though tonight, looks like rain's coming." Poirot nodded politely, climbing in as the carriage lurched forward. The road wound through dense woods, where twisted branches seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. He pondered the invitation from his old acquaintance, Sir Reginald Hargrove, a wealthy industrialist who'd recently acquired the inn as a hobby. "A gathering of interesting souls," the letter had said. "Do come, Poirot. Your deductive mind might find amusement in our little games." As the carriage crested the hill, the Starfall Inn came into view, a grand Tudor-style building with ivy-clinging walls, mullioned windows glowing warmly, and a sign creaking in the breeze. It exuded an air of faded elegance, like a once grand dame now whispering tales of better days. Poirot disembarked, tipping Jenkins generously, and entered the foyer. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and fresh-baked scones. Behind the reception desk stood Mrs. Eleanor Finch, the innkeeper, a stout woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanour. "Monsieur Poirot, what an honour!" she exclaimed, her voice a mix of genuine warmth and practised hospitality. "Sir Reginald has been eagerly awaiting you. Let me show you to your room." Poirot's suite on the second floor was cosy yet luxurious, with a four-poster bed, a crackling fireplace, and a view of the sprawling gardens below. He unpacked meticulously, arranging his toiletries with precision. His pomade, his tisane herbs, and a small notebook for jotting observations. Order and method, he reminded himself. These are the keys to clarity. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend and occasional companion, who had arrived earlier. "Poirot, old chap, jolly good to see you," Hastings beamed, his face ruddy from the chill outside. "This place is smashing. Sir Reginald's got quite the crowd here. Artists, businessmen, even a famous actress. We're in for a treat." Downstairs in the drawing room, the guests mingled over pre-dinner sherry. Sir Reginald Hargrove, a burly man with a booming laugh and a red-veined nose from too many ports, greeted Poirot effusively. "Poirot, the man who solves the unsolvable. Welcome, welcome. Let me introduce you around." There was Lady Victoria Beaumont, a glamorous actress in her 30s, draped in pearls and exuding theatrical flair. "Charmed, monsieur," she purred, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Next to her stood her husband, Dr. Lionel Beaumont, a stern physician with a clipped moustache and a habit of fidgeting with his watch chain. "Pleasure," he muttered, barely meeting Poirot's gaze. Then there was Miss Clara Voss, a young American heiress with bobbed hair and an infectious giggle, travelling with her aunt, the formidable Mrs. Agatha Voss, who clutched a lorgnette and surveyed the room like a hawk. Europe is so quaint, Clara chirped, but this inn feels like something out of a ghost story. Rounding out the group were Mr. Harold Trent, a sly stockbroker with slicked-back hair and a perpetual smirk, and Reverend Elias Thorne, a mild-mannered clergyman whose sermons, Poirot later learned, often touched on themes of sin and redemption. A diverse assembly, Poirot observed to Hastings as they sipped their drinks, each with their own motives for being here, I suspect. Dinner was served in the oak-panelled dining hall, under a chandelier that cast flickering shadows. The meal began pleasantly, cream of mushroom soup, followed by roast pheasant with all the trimmings. Conversation flowed like the wine. Lady Victoria regaled them with tales of her latest West End production, while Sir Reginald boasted about his recent business ventures in steel manufacturing. "Times are tough with the Depression," he said, "but innovation wins the day." Dr. Beaumont nodded curtly, mentioning his research into rare poisons, which earned a raised eyebrow from Poirot. "Poisons, Doctor? A curious field for a healer." As the main course arrived, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Miss Voss complained about a missing brooch, accusing the staff under her breath. Mr. Trent made a snide remark about Sir Reginald's finances, hinting at rumours of debt. "All in good fun," Trent laughed, but his eyes were cold. Reverend Thorne tried to steer the talk to lighter topics, quoting scripture about forgiveness, but Lady Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically. "Darling, save the sermons for Sunday." Poirot watched it all, his little grey cells buzzing. "People reveal much when they think no one is listening," he whispered to Hastings. Dessert, apple crumble with custard, brought a momentary lull. But as coffee was poured, Sir Reginald stood to make an announcement. "My friends, I've gathered you here not just for leisure. Tomorrow we'll play a little game. A mock murder mystery I've devised, clues hidden around the inn, alibis to concoct, and Poirot here will be our judge." The room erupted in excited murmurs. Clara clapped her hands while Dr. Beaumont frowned deeply. "Games with death? Seems morbid," he grumbled. After dinner, the group retired to the lounge for brandy and cigars. Poirot excused himself early, claiming fatigue from travel, but really to observe from afar. From the shadows of the staircase, he saw hushed conversations. Lady Victoria whispering urgently to Trent, Mrs. Voss scolding her niece, and Sir Reginald slipping a note to the innkeeper. "Interesting," Poirot mused, retiring to his room. He brewed a tisane and settled into an armchair, reviewing the faces and words in his mind. "Everyone has a secret, Hastings. The question is, which one will lead to trouble?" The night deepened, rain pattering against the windows like impatient fingers. Poirot dozed fitfully, dreams filled with starlit daggers and echoing screams. At precisely 2:17 a.m., he noted the time on his pocket watch. A blood-curdling cry shattered the silence. It came from downstairs. Poirot bolted upright, grabbing his dressing gown. "Mon Dieu! It begins!" Hastings burst into the hallway, dishevelled. "Poirot, did you hear that?" Together, they hurried down, joined by bleary-eyed guests. In the foyer, chaos reigned. Mrs. Finch knelt over a body. Sir Reginald Hargrove sprawled on the Persian rug, a jewelled dagger protruding from his chest. Blood pooled around him, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Lady Victoria screamed, fainting into her husband's arms. "He's dead! Murdered!" Poirot knelt, examining the scene without touching. "Do not disturb anything, mes amis. The police must be called." But as thunder rumbled outside, isolating the inn, he knew the killer was among them. Jenkins arrived, breathless from the stables. "Phone lines are down. Storm must have knocked him out." The group exchanged fearful glances. Reverend Thorne murmured a prayer, while Trent lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "Calm yourselves," Poirot commanded, his voice steady. "Hercule Poirot is here. We will uncover the truth." He noted details. The dagger from the inn's display case, a torn scrap of paper in Sir Reginald's hand, muddied footprints leading to the garden door. Clara Voss whimpered. "It was supposed to be a game." But this was no game. As the chapter of arrival closed, the real mystery unfolded, drawing everyone into a tangle of alibis, motives, and lies. What secrets hid in the Starfall Inn's shadowed corners? The answers would come, but not without more twists. Chapter 2. Shadows of Suspicion. The rain battered the Starfall Inn as Hercule Poirot stood over Sir Reginald Hargrove's body, his sharp eyes scanning the foyer. The air was thick with tension, the flickering oil lamps casting long shadows that danced like spectres across the oak-panelled walls. The guests huddled in a semicircle, their faces a mix of shock, fear, and something else, something Poirot's keen mind noted immediately. Calculation. Someone in this room had plunged the jewelled dagger into Sir Reginald's heart, and the little Belgian detective was determined to find out who. Mrs. Eleanor Finch, the innkeeper, wrung her hands, her usual composure fraying. "I've sent Jenkins to fetch the constable from Eldridge Hollow, but with this storm, it could be hours before help arrives." Her voice trembled, betraying the strain of hosting a murder scene. Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching slightly. "Then we must act swiftly, Madam Finch. The truth waits for no one, not even the storm." He turned to the group, his gaze piercing. "No one is to leave this inn. We will gather in the lounge, and I will begin my inquiries." The lounge, with its velvet armchairs and roaring fire, felt less inviting now, the warmth unable to dispel the chill of death. Poirot directed everyone to sit, arranging them like pieces on a chessboard. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his loyal presence a quiet reassurance. "Right, Poirot," he whispered. "Where do we start?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "With the simplest question, mon ami. Where was everyone when the scream was heard?" Lady Victoria Beaumont, still pale from her faint, clutched a glass of brandy. "I was in my room, asleep," she said, her voice theatrical yet brittle. "That scream woke me, and I rushed down with Lionel." Her husband, Dr. Lionel Beaumont, nodded curtly. "Same, we share a suite. I heard nothing until the cry." His fingers toyed with his watch chain. A nervous tick, Poirot filed away. Miss Clara Voss, the young American heiress, sat huddled under a shawl, her eyes wide. "I was in my room too, reading. Aunt Agatha was with me. She'd been scolding me about my posture." Mrs. Agatha Voss, her aunt, adjusted her lorgnette and sniffed. "Indeed, Clara's always got her nose in some dreadful novel. We heard the scream and came straight down." Her tone was imperious, but Poirot noticed her hands trembling slightly. Mr. Harold Trent, the stockbroker, leaned back in his chair, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "I was in the billiard room, practicing my shots. Alone, mind you. Heard the scream and legged it to the foyer." His casual demeanour felt forced, his smirk not quite reaching his eyes. Reverend Elias Thorne, clutching a small Bible, spoke softly. "I was in the library, preparing tomorrow's sermon notes. The scream startled me, and I joined the others here." His voice was calm, but his knuckles were white around the book. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "And you, Madame Finch? Where were you at 2:17 a.m.? The innkeeper flushed. "In my office, balancing the books. I often work late." "The scream brought me running." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each response. No one admitted to being near the foyer, yet the muddy footprints by the garden door suggested someone had ventured outside, or let someone in. He turned his attention to the crime scene, which he'd briefly examined before moving the group. "The dagger," he said aloud. "It was taken from the display case in this very lounge, was it not?" Mrs. Finch nodded. "Yes, it's an antique, part of the inn's decor. It was there at dinner." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "So the killer used a weapon close at hand, opportunistic perhaps, or planned to look so," Hastings piped up. "What about that scrap of paper in Sir Reginald's hand, Poirot? Looked like it was torn from something." Poirot nodded, recalling the crumpled fragment, smeared with blood but bearing a few legible words. "Meet me. Midnight." He had left it undisturbed for the police but memorized its details. A clue, Hastings, but incomplete. We must learn who Sir Reginald intended to meet, and why. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Lady Victoria sipped her brandy, her eyes darting to Trent, who stubbed out his cigarette with unnecessary force. Dr. Beaumont stared into the fire, his jaw tight. Clara whispered something to her aunt, who shushed her sharply. Reverend Thorne opened his Bible as if seeking solace, while Mrs. Finch busied herself adjusting a lamp. Poirot watched them all, his little grey cells humming. Motive, he murmured to Hastings. We must find the motive. Sir Reginald was a wealthy man, but wealth breeds enemies as surely as it buys friends. He addressed the group again. Tell me, what was your connection to Sir Reginald? Lady Victoria spoke first, her voice regaining its stage-ready confidence. He was a patron of my theatre company, generous but demanding. Always wanted a say in the productions. Dr. Beaumont added, he funded some of my research, but we weren't close. Business, nothing more. His tone was clipped, evasive. Clara hesitated, then blurted, he was nice to me. Gave me a tour of the inn yesterday. Told me stories about its history. Mrs. Voss frowned. He was too familiar with my niece, if you ask me, always offering her wine. Trent chuckled darkly. Reginald? He was my client. Made a fortune in stocks, lost a bit too. We had disagreements. Reverend Thorne cleared his throat. He attended my church occasionally. A man wrestling with his conscience, I thought. Poirot absorbed each answer, noting the undercurrents. Sir Reginald had ties to them all, financial, personal, perhaps even contentious. But which tie was strong enough to snap into murder? He decided to probe further. Did anyone see Sir Reginald after dinner before the scream? Silence fell, heavy as the rain outside. Finally, Mrs. Finch spoke. I saw him in the hall around midnight, heading toward the garden door. He seemed agitated. This revelation sparked murmurs. Poirot pounced. Agitated, you say? Did he speak? Mrs. Finch shook her head. No, he just nodded and went out. I thought he needed air. Poirot's mind raced. The note mentioned a midnight meeting, and now Sir Reginald was seen near the garden door, where the muddy footprints were found. Had he met his killer outside? Before he could press further, Jenkins burst in, soaked from the rain. No luck, sir. Roads are flooded. Constable can't get through till morning. The group groaned, fear tightening their faces. Poirot raised a hand. No matter. Hercule Poirot does not need a constable to find the truth. We will continue. He assigned Hastings to guard the foyer, ensuring the crime scene remained untouched. Then he turned to the guests. Return to your rooms, but do not lock your doors. I may need to speak with you again. Grumbling, they dispersed, casting wary glances at one another. Lady Victoria clung to her husband, Clara to her aunt. Trent lingered, lighting another cigarette, while Reverend Thorne offered a quiet blessing before leaving. Alone with Hastings, Poirot stared into the fire. This is no random act, Hastings. The dagger, the note, the footprints, they tell a story, but we need more pieces. He resolved to inspect the garden at first light, hoping the rain hadn't washed away clues. As the clock struck 3, the inn settled into an uneasy silence, broken only by the storm's relentless drumming. The mystery deepened, each guest a potential suspect, each shadow hiding a secret. Who had met Sir Reginald at midnight, and what had driven them to kill? The answers lay ahead, waiting to be uncovered by Poirot's relentless logic. Chapter 3. The Garden's Secrets. The storm had softened to a drizzle by dawn, leaving the Starfall Inn cloaked in a grey mist that curled around its gables like a shroud. Hercule Poirot, dressed impeccably despite the early hour, stood at the garden door, his polished shoes carefully avoiding the muddy threshold. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and bruised roses. He studied the footprints he'd noted the night before. Smudged but distinct, leading from the foyer into the garden's winding paths. The killer came this way, Hastings, he said, his voice low as Captain Hastings joined him. rubbing sleep from his eyes. Or perhaps Sir Reginald himself. We must follow the trail. The garden was a labyrinth of overgrown hedges and stone benches, its beauty marred by the night's chaos. Poirot moved with purpose, his eyes scanning for clues. The footprints, partially washed by rain, led to a small gazebo draped in ivy, its wooden floor slick with moisture. There, beneath a bench, he spotted something glinting, a silver cigarette case engraved with the initials HT. He crouched, careful not to touch it. Mon ami, this belongs to Mr. Harold Trent, does it not? Hastings nodded, frowning. Blighter said he was in the billiard room, not out here. Poirot tucked a handkerchief around the case and slipped it into his pocket for safekeeping. We shall ask him about this. But first, let us see where else the path leads. The footprints continued, fainter now, toward a low stone wall bordering the woods. There, caught on a thorn bush, was a shred of fabric, deep blue, like the velvet of Lady Victoria's evening gown. Poirot plucked it carefully, holding it to the light. Interesting. 2 guests who claim to be in their rooms, yet evidence places them outside. Coincidence? I think not. Returning to the inn, Poirot gathered the guests in the dining hall for breakfast, though appetites were scarce. The table was set with cold meats, toast and tea, but the mood was as heavy as the fog outside. Mrs. Finch bustled about, her face drawn, while Jenkins hovered near the door, muttering about the flooded roads. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding silence. Mes amis, the storm has delayed the police, but it will not delay Hercule Poirot. I have found items in the garden that require explanation. He produced the cigarette case, holding it aloft. Mr. Trent, is this yours? The stockbroker's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing. Might be. I've got a few like it. Could have dropped it yesterday. Poirot's smile was polite but sharp. Yesterday, you say? Yet it was dry, untouched by rain until last night. Trent shrugged, lighting a cigarette with forced nonchalance. Can't recall every step I take, Poirot. Next, Poirot held up the scrap of blue velvet. And this Lady Victoria, does it match your gown? The actress gasped, her hand flying to her chest. My gown? Why, It must be a mistake. I was in my room, as I said. Dr. Beaumont gripped her arm, his voice low. Careful, darling. Poirot noted the exchange, his mind cataloguing their reactions. Mrs. Voss snorted through her lorgnette. Actresses and their dramatics. Always trouble. Clara beside her bit her lip, her eyes darting to the window. Reverend Thorne spoke up, his voice gentle. Monsieur Poirot, surely these could belong to anyone. The inn has many visitors. Poirot nodded. Possible, Reverend, but unlikely. The garden was locked after dinner, accessible only through the foyer door, or by someone with a key. He turned to Mrs. Finch. Who holds the garden key? She hesitated. Only me and Jenkins. And Sir Reginald, of course. He liked late-night strolls. Poirot's thoughts churned. The key, the footprints, the cigarette case, the fabric, all pointed to a clandestine meeting gone wrong. But why? He decided to probe deeper into Sir Reginald's final hours. Madam Finch, you saw Sir Reginald at midnight heading to the garden. Did he carry anything? She frowned, thinking. A small leather book like a journal. He was clutching it tightly. Poirot's eyes lit up. A journal. And where is it now? Mrs. Finch shook her head. Not with the body. I didn't see it. The absence of the journal was a new thread to pull. Poirot excused the guests, asking them to remain in their rooms while he searched Sir Reginald's suite. Accompanied by Hastings, he entered the room, a masculine space with heavy furniture and cigar-scented air. The bed was unmade, suggesting Sir Reginald hadn't slept. Poirot examined the desk, finding business papers, contracts, ledgers, a letter from a creditor demanding payment. Sir Reginald was in financial trouble, Hastings. This could be motive for someone. Under the desk, half hidden by a rug, was a single page, torn and crumpled. Poirot smoothed it out, revealing a list of initials and numbers. VB 5000 HT, 10,000 AV 2000. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. A record of debts, bribes, or something else? Hastings scratched his head. Looks like a code, Poirot. Could be payments to the guests. Poirot nodded. Or payments owed. We must learn what these mean. Leaving the room, Poirot paused at the window which overlooked the garden. A faint mark on the sill caught his eye. A smudge of mud, as if someone had climbed through. Another entry point, perhaps, he mused. He instructed Hastings to check the other windows, while he interviewed Jenkins in the stables. The old stable hand was mucking out stalls, his face weathered as the wood around him. Jenkins, Poirot began. Did you see anyone in the garden last night? The man hesitated, then shook his head. Too dark, sir, but I heard voices around midnight. Couldn't make out who. Poirot pressed further. And the garden key? Could anyone have taken it? Jenkins scratched his chin. Kept it in the office, but it's a busy place. Someone sneaky could have nabbed it. Poirot thanked him, his mind racing. A stolen key, a secret meeting, a missing journal. Pieces of a puzzle, but not yet complete. Back inside, Hastings reported no other open windows. But he'd found a muddy handkerchief in the hall near Clara's room. Could be nothing, Poirot, but it's odd. Poirot examined it, noting the initials CV embroidered in silk. Miss Voss too. The garden seems a popular place for those who claim to be elsewhere. As noon approached, the inn remained cut off, the storm's aftermath leaving roads impassable. Poirot gathered his notes, his little grey cells working overtime. The cigarette case, the velvet, the journal page, the handkerchief, all pointed to multiple guests with secrets. Had Sir Reginald been blackmailing someone? Or was the motive personal, rooted in betrayal or revenge? The answers lay closer, but danger lurked in every shadowed corner. The dining hall clock chimed, pulling Poirot from his thoughts. He resolved to confront each suspect individually, starting with Trent and his cigarette case. The web of lies was tightening, and Poirot would untangle it, thread by thread, before the killer struck again. Chapter 4. The Stockbroker's Secrets. The morning mist lingered over the Starfall Inn, casting a ghostly veil over the windows as Hercule Poirot sat in the library, a small fire crackling to ward off the damp chill. He had chosen this quiet room, lined with leather-bound books and heavy drapes, for his first private interrogation. Mr. Harold Trent, the slick-haired stockbroker, lounged across from him, a fresh cigarette glowing between his fingers. His casual smirk belied the tension in his shoulders, and Poirot's sharp eyes missed nothing. Monsieur Trent, he began, his voice calm but probing. Let us speak plainly. Your cigarette case was found in the garden, near the gazebo where Sir Reginald may have met his killer. You said you were in the billiard room. Explain. Trent exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes narrowing. Like I said, Poirot, I might have dropped it earlier. I wandered the grounds yesterday afternoon. Things fall out of pockets. Poirot leaned forward, his moustache twitching. Yet this case was dry, untouched by the rain that fell all evening. It was placed there after midnight, monsieur. And you were not in the billiard room when the scream was heard. You were seen near the foyer by Jenkins moments before. Trent's smirk faltered, his fingers tightening on the cigarette. Jenkins is half blind in the dark. You're fishing, Poirot. Poirot produced the torn journal page from his pocket, careful not to smudge it. This was found in Sir Reginald's room. Your initials, HT, beside the number 10,000. A debt, a payment, or perhaps blackmail. Trent's face paled, but he recovered quickly, leaning back with a forced laugh. Business dealings, nothing more. Reginald invested heavily in my firm. Sometimes he lost, sometimes he won. Those numbers mean nothing sinister. Poirot's smile was thin. Yet Sir Reginald was in financial ruin, no? A man in debt does not lose £10,000 lightly. Trent stubbed out his cigarette, his jaw tight. Look, Poirot, I didn't like the man. He was pushy, always meddling in my trades. But kill him? I'd rather swindle him legally. Poirot noted the evasion, filing it away. Very well, but you will remain here until I am satisfied. Trent stood, brushing his suit. Do your worst, detective. I've got nothing to hide. But as he left, Poirot caught a flicker of unease in his eyes. Next, Poirot summoned Captain Hastings, who'd been discreetly observing the guests in the lounge. Anything, mon ami? Hastings rubbed his chin. Lady Victoria's been pacing like a caged tiger, whispering to her husband, and Clara Voss keeps scribbling in a little notebook. Looked nervous when I got close. Poirot nodded. Good. Keep watching. Now, let us see what Mademoiselle Voss reveals. Clara entered the library, her bobbed hair bouncing as she fidgeted with her shawl. Her youthful energy seemed dimmed, her eyes darting to the door. Monsieur Poirot, this is all so dreadful, she said, her American accent thick with worry. I don't know anything, I swear. Poirot gestured to a chair, his tone gentle. Mademoiselle, a handkerchief with your initials was found near your room, stained with mud. Were you in the garden last night? Clara's cheeks flushed. No, I dropped it in the hall, maybe. I was restless, pacing a bit, but I stayed inside. Poirot held up the journal page. Your initials CV with 2000. What did Sir Reginald want from you? Clara's eyes widened, then filled with tears. He offered to invest in my art studies in Paris. Said he'd pay £2,000, but I had to. Keep it secret from Aunt Agatha. She'd never approve. Poirot tilted his head. And did you accept? Clara shook her head vehemently. No, I told him I'd think about it. He gave me that journal page as a sort of promise, but I tore it up and gave it back. Her story was plausible, but Poirot sensed gaps. And this notebook you carry now, what is in it? Clara clutched her bag. Just sketches, silly things. Nothing to do with this. Poirot let it pass for now, dismissing her with a nod. Stay close, mademoiselle. The truth has a way of surfacing. Alone again, Poirot paced the library, his mind piecing together fragments. Trent's cigarette case, Clara's handkerchief, the journal page, each pointed to a web of connections, but the motive remained elusive. He decided to inspect the gazebo again, hoping for overlooked clues. With Hastings in tow, he ventured into the garden, the air now crisp with the scent of wet leaves. The gazebo's wooden floor revealed a new detail, a tiny pearl, like those on Lady Victoria's necklace, wedged between the boards. Mon Dieu, Hastings, Poirot murmured, pocketing the pearl. Another guest in the garden, despite her claims. Hastings frowned. But why would Lady Victoria be out here? And what about that journal? Could it be a ledger of secrets Sir Reginald was using against them? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisely, mon ami. A man like Sir Reginald collects favours and enemies. We must learn what he held over each. Returning to the inn, Poirot overheard a heated exchange in the hall. Dr. Beaumont's low voice hissed, "Keep quiet, Victoria, or we're done for." Lady Victoria's reply was sharp. "You're the one who got us into this mess." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings, who whispered, "Sounds like they're hiding something big." Poirot nodded. "We will speak to the doctor next, but first I must see Mrs. Finch about that journal." Mrs. Finch was in her office, sorting linens with trembling hands. "Madame," Poirot began, "Sir Reginald's journal. Have you seen it since last night? She shook her head. No, monsieur. He always carried it close, like it was precious. Poirot pressed further. And did he ever speak of debts or enemies? Mrs. Finch hesitated, then whispered. He mentioned a falling out with Dr. Beaumont, something about a failed investment, but he didn't elaborate. This new thread, Dr. Beaumont's grudge, added weight to the doctor's evasive demeanour. Poirot thanked Mrs. Finch and returned to the library, where he jotted notes in his small book. The pearl, the journal, the argument. Each clue tightened the noose around the suspects, but the killer's identity remained shrouded, like the mist outside. As the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, Poirot felt the urgency of time. The police were still delayed, and the inn's isolation made every moment critical. He resolved to confront Dr. Beaumont next, determined to crack the doctor's stoic facade. The truth was close, but the shadows of suspicion grew darker with every step. Chapter 5. The Doctor's Burden. The Starfall Inn's dining hall was silent, save for the clink of teacups as the guests sat in uneasy quiet, their eyes darting suspiciously. Hercule Poirot, his posture as precise as ever, had summoned Dr. Lionel Beaumont for a private conversation in the inn's small parlour, a room adorned with faded tapestries and a single window overlooking the misty hills. The doctor entered, his face taut, his fingers fidgeting with his watch chain. Poirot gestured to a chair, his voice smooth but unyielding. Monsieur le Docteur, we must speak of Sir Reginald. You had a disagreement with him, no? Something about an investment gone wrong? Dr. Beaumont sat stiffly, his lips a thin line. Mrs. Finch has been talking, I see. Yes, Reginald funded my research into certain medical compounds. He lost money when the project stalled. It happens. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the doctor's hesitation. Stalled, you say? Yet I sense there is more. Your name appeared in Sir Reginald's journal, alongside sums of money. What did he hold over you? Beaumont's hand froze on his watch. Nothing. It was a loan, repaid long ago. You're chasing shadows, Poirot. Unconvinced, Poirot leaned forward. And the pearl found in the gazebo, matching those on your wife's necklace. She claimed to be in your suite, yet evidence places her outside. Were you both in the garden last night? Beaumont's face darkened, his voice low. Leave Victoria out of this. She was with me, asleep. That pearl could have come from anywhere. Poirot noted the protective edge in his tone, a crack in the doctor's stoic mask. Very well, Poirot said, but secrets, like wounds, fester when hidden. After dismissing Beaumont, Poirot conferred with Captain Hastings in the hall. The doctor is guarding something, Hastings. His wife, perhaps? Or a shared secret? Hastings nodded, his brow furrowed. I saw him slip a note to Lady Victoria during lunch. Looked like he was warning her. Poirot's moustache twitched. Bon, we will watch them closely. But now let us examine the inn's staff. They see more than they say. Poirot sought out Jenkins, the stable hand, who was polishing tack in the barn. The grizzled man looked up warily as Poirot approached. Jenkins, you heard voices in the garden at midnight. Can you recall anything more? Perhaps a tone, a word? Jenkins scratched his beard, squinting. One was deep, like Sir Reginald's. The other, higher, maybe a woman's. Arguing they were, but the rain muffled it. Poirot pressed further. And the garden key. Could a guest have taken it from the office? Jenkins shrugged. Possible. Mrs. Finch leaves the office unattended sometimes. Anyone could have slipped in. This opened a new possibility. A guest with access to the key could have planned the murder. Poirot thanked Jenkins and returned to the inn, his mind turning to the missing journal. He decided to search the lounge, where Sir Reginald had spent his final evening. The room was empty, the fire now a pile of glowing embers. Poirot examined the display case where the dagger had hung, noting its lock was intact. No signs of tampering. The killer had taken it during dinner, when the room was bustling. Under a cushion on an armchair, Poirot found a small key, its brass surface tarnished. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, holding it up to the light. "Could this be the garden key?" He hurried to Mrs. Finch, who was stacking plates in the kitchen. "Madame, is this the key to the garden door?" She examined it, nodding slowly. "Yes, but it was in my office last night. Someone must have taken it and put it back." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Or placed it in the lounge to mislead us." The discovery shifted the puzzle. The key suggested premeditation, not a crime of impulse. Poirot's thoughts returned to Dr. Beaumont and Lady Victoria. Their evasive answers, the pearl, the overheard argument, were they conspiring together, or was one covering for the other? He resolved to confront Lady Victoria next, but first, he needed to verify the journal page's cryptic numbers. In the library, Poirot spread out his notes, cross-referencing the initials. VB, Victoria Beaumont, HT, Harold Trent, AV, Agatha Voss. The sums, 5,000, 10,000, 2,000, hinted at transactions, but of what kind? Blackmail seemed likely, given Sir Reginald's financial troubles. Poirot recalled Mrs. Finch's mention of the doctor's failed project. Had Sir Reginald threatened to expose Beaumont's failure, demanding payment to stay silent? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Reverend Thorn entered, his Bible tucked under his arm. "Monsieur Poirot, I sense the weight of this tragedy on you. May I offer counsel?" Poirot smiled politely. "Your kindness is noted, Reverend, but I seek truth, not solace. Did you know of Sir Reginald's dealings with Dr. Beaumont?" Thorn hesitated, his eyes flickering. "Only that they argued recently. Sir Reginald mentioned a betrayal in passing, but I didn't pry." Poirot filed this away, dismissing the Reverend with thanks. As evening fell, the inn's isolation grew oppressive, the roads still impassable. Poirot stood at the parlour window, watching the fading light. The key, the pearl, the journal page all pointed to a carefully laid trap, but who had set it? Dr. Beaumont's defensiveness suggested guilt, yet Lady Victoria's nervous glances hinted at her own secrets. The truth was near, but Poirot needed one more piece to unravel the killer's motive. He decided to question Lady Victoria at dinner, where the guests would gather under his watchful eye. The net was tightening, and the killer's composure would soon crack under the pressure of Hercule Poirot's relentless logic. Chapter 6. The Actress's Mask. The dining hall of the Starfall Inn glowed dimly under the chandelier's flickering light, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken accusations as the guests gathered for dinner. Hercule Poirot sat at the head of the table, his eyes scanning each face like a hawk circling its prey. The meal, roast lamb and potatoes, was served with strained politeness by Mrs. Finch, but the clatter of cutlery did little to mask the tension. Poirot had chosen this moment to confront Lady Victoria Beaumont, whose pearl in the gazebo and whispered argument with her husband had raised his suspicions. He sipped his wine, waiting for the right moment to strike. Lady Victoria, resplendent in a crimson gown, laughed too loudly at a remark from Clara Voss, her theatrical charm a thin veneer over her unease. Poirot cleared his throat, drawing all eyes. "Madame Beaumont," he began, his voice velvet with menace, "a pearl from your necklace was found in the gazebo, where Sir Reginald likely met his killer. You said you were asleep, yet this suggests otherwise. Care to explain?" The room fell silent, Fawkes pausing mid-air. Lady Victoria's smile froze, her hand brushing her throat where the necklace gleamed. "That's absurd," she said, her voice a touch too shrill. "I lost a pearl days ago during a walk. It must have been swept into the garden." Poirot tilted his head, unconvinced. "A pearl, perfectly lodged between the gazebo's floorboards, untouched by rain." "No, madame, it was placed there last night. And I heard you arguing with your husband today, warning him to keep quiet. What are you hiding?" Dr. Beaumont's hand tightened on his glass, but he said nothing, his eyes fixed on his wife. Lady Victoria tossed her head, regaining her stage presence. "You're mistaken, Monsieur Poirot. Lionel and I were discussing a private matter, nothing to do with Sir Reginald. As for the pearl, I'm not responsible for where it landed. Poirot's moustache twitched. Yet Sir Reginald's journal listed VB with £5,000. A payment, perhaps, for a secret you wished to keep. Her eyes widened, but she recovered swiftly. He funded my theatre, as I told you. That's all. Poirot let the silence linger, noting Dr. Beaumont's rigid posture and Clara's nervous glance at her aunt. He changed tack. Very well, madame. But tell me, did you see Sir Reginald after dinner? Perhaps near the garden? Lady Victoria hesitated, then shook her head. No, I retired early. Lionel can confirm it. The doctor nodded curtly, but Poirot caught a flicker of tension between them, a silent signal of discord. After dinner, Poirot pulled Captain Hastings aside in the lounge, where the guests lingered over coffee. Hastings, Lady Victoria is protecting someone, perhaps herself, perhaps her husband. That argument you overheard suggests they share a secret tied to Sir Reginald. Hastings frowned. Could they have acted together? The Pearl places her in the garden, and Beaumont's got that temper. Poirot nodded. Possible, mon ami. But we need more than a pearl to prove it. Determined to uncover more, Poirot slipped into the inn's office while Mrs. Finch was occupied. He searched the desk, finding a ledger of guest bookings. One entry caught his eye. Lady Victoria and Dr. Beaumont had stayed at the inn 3 months prior. During a weekend, Sir Reginald also attended. Curious, Poirot murmured. Their connection runs deeper than they admit. He also found a crumpled receipt for a jeweller in London, dated a week ago, listing repairs to a pearl necklace. So the necklace was recently fixed, yet a pearl was lost in the gazebo, he mused. Returning to the lounge, Poirot observed the guests. Mrs. Agatha Voss was scolding Clara for spilling coffee, while Harold Trent smoked in a corner, watching Lady Victoria with a sly grin. Reverend Thorne sat quietly, his Bible open but unread, his eyes distant. Poirot approached him, sensing an opportunity. Reverend, you spoke of Sir Reginald's betrayal. Can you elaborate? Thorne shifted uncomfortably. It was a passing comment. He felt someone close had deceived him, but he named no names. This vague hint frustrated Poirot, but he pressed on, his mind returning to the garden key found in the lounge. He decided to test Mrs. Finch's memory. Finding her in the kitchen, he asked, Madame, when you saw Sir Reginald at midnight, was he alone? She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. I thought so, but there was a shadow behind him, near the garden door. I couldn't see who. Poirot's pulse quickened. A shadow. Man or woman? Mrs. Finch shook her head. Too dark to tell. The shadow was a new clue, suggesting Sir Reginald's midnight meeting involved a second person, likely the killer. Poirot's thoughts churned. Lady Victoria's pearl, her husband's defensiveness, the journal's cryptic numbers. Were they being blackmailed over a past indiscretion, or had Sir Reginald's financial demands pushed one of them to murder? The actress's poise was a mask, but Poirot was determined to peel it away. As night fell, the inn's isolation deepened, the roads still blocked by mud and debris. Poirot stood by the parlour window, the moon obscured by clouds. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was incomplete. He resolved to shadow the Beaumonts closely, sensing their secret was key to the murder. The killer's trail was growing warmer, and Poirot's little grey cells were ready to strike. Chapter 7. The Aunt's Agenda. The Starfall Inn's corridors were hushed as midnight approached, the storm's last echoes fading into a restless quiet. Hercule Poirot sat in his room, a single candle casting soft shadows across his notebook. His mind churned over the clues, the pearl, the garden key, the journal page, and the shadow Mrs. Finch had glimpsed. Each pointed to a web of secrets, but Mrs. Agatha Voss, the imperious aunt of Clara, had drawn his attention. Her sharp tongue and watchful eyes suggested she knew more than she let on. Poirot resolved to question her. Sensing her guarded demeanour hid a piece of the puzzle. He found Mrs. Voss in the morning room the next day, sipping tea and peering through her lorgnette at a newspaper. The room, with its floral wallpaper and heavy curtains, felt stifling despite the open window. Madame Voss, Poirot began, bowing slightly. A word, if you please. Your name, A.V., appears in Sir Reginald's journal beside £2,000. What was your connection to him? Mrs. Voss lowered her lorgnette, her lips pursing. Impertinent, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald was a family acquaintance. He offered to fund Clara's education, nothing more. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet Clara said she rejected his offer, and the journal suggests a transaction. Was he pressuring you, perhaps? Mrs. Voss stiffened, her knuckles whitening on her teacup. Nonsense. He was a gentleman, if overgenerous. I told him Clara's future was my concern. Poirot pressed further. And last night, where were you when the scream echoed through the inn? She met his gaze, unflinching. In my room, with Clara. She was restless, but we stayed put. Sensing evasion, Poirot shifted tactics. Madam, you disapproved of Sir Reginald's attention to your niece. Did you confront him? Mrs. Voss's eyes flickered, but her voice remained steady. I warned him to keep his distance. A young girl's reputation is delicate. Poirot noted her defensiveness, recalling Clara's nervous scribbling. And Clara's notebook, have you seen its contents? Mrs. Voss sniffed. Childish drawings, nothing of consequence. Dismissing her for now, Poirot sought Clara in the garden, where she sat sketching under a willow tree. The air was damp, the grass glistening with dew. Mademoiselle Clara, he said gently, your aunt claims you were together all night, yet a muddy handkerchief with your initials suggests otherwise. Were you in the garden? Clara's pencil froze, her cheeks paling. I dropped it earlier, maybe. Aunt Agatha kept me in our room. She's strict like that. Her voice wavered, and Poirot sensed fear beneath her words. He showed her the journal page. Your aunt's initials, A.V., beside £2,000. Did she discuss money with Sir Reginald? Clara bit her lip. She was angry with him. I overheard her saying he was meddling in our affairs. But she wouldn't hurt anyone. Poirot nodded, unconvinced. And your notebook, may I see it? Clara clutched it tightly. It's private. Just sketches of the inn, flowers, things like that. Her reluctance deepened Poirot's suspicion. Returning to the inn, Poirot conferred with Captain Hastings in the lounge, where the fire crackled weakly. Hastings, Mrs. Voss is hiding something, and Clara is too frightened to speak. That notebook may hold answers. Hastings rubbed his chin. I saw Mrs. Voss slip out of her room last night, around 1 a.m. She went toward the office, then came back quick. Poirot's moustache twitched. Bon. She may have returned the garden key, or taken something else. Poirot searched the office again, finding a locked drawer in Mrs. Finch's desk. With a hairpin and a deft touch, he opened it, revealing a bundle of letters tied with string. One, addressed to Mrs. Voss, was from Sir Reginald, dated a month prior. It read, Agatha, reconsider my offer. Clara's talent deserves Paris, and £2,000 ensures it. But I expect discretion. Poirot's pulse quickened. Was Sir Reginald bribing Mrs. Voss for control over Clara or something more? He confronted Mrs. Voss again in the morning room, holding the letter. Madame, Sir Reginald offered you money, but for what? To send Clara away, or to silence a secret? Mrs. Voss's face reddened, her lorgnette dropping to her lap. How dare you? He wanted to exploit Clara's youth, parade her as his protégée. I refused. Poirot leaned closer. And did you meet him in the garden to settle this? She gasped. No, I was in my room. Her denial rang hollow. Poirot thanked her and stepped outside, his mind racing. Mrs. Voss's anger at Sir Reginald suggested a motive, but her protectiveness over Clara complicated the picture. Had she acted to shield her niece or to protect her own reputation? The letters hinted at a deeper connection, perhaps a scandal Sir Reginald threatened to expose. As noon approached, the inn remained cut off, the roads still mired in mud. Poirot stood by the garden door, staring at the gazebo in the distance. The shadow Mrs. Finch saw, the journal's numbers, Clara's notebook, All pointed to a tangled motive. Mrs. Voss was a key player, but was she the killer? He resolved to examine Clara's notebook next, certain it held more than sketches. The truth was inching closer, but the inn's shadows grew longer, hiding the killer's next move. Chapter 8. The Notebook's Tale. The Starfall Inn seemed to hold its breath as the late morning sun struggled through heavy clouds, casting a pale glow over the polished floors. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small notebook open, his pencil scribbling furiously as he pieced together the fragments of the case. The shadow in the garden, the stolen key, the pearl, the cryptic journal page. Each clue pointed to a motive rooted in secrets, and Clara Voss's guarded notebook had become his next target. The young American's nervous demeanor and her aunt's fierce protectiveness suggested the sketches she clutched so tightly hid more than idle doodles. Poirot was determined to uncover their truth. He found Clara in the conservatory, a glass-walled room bursting with ferns and orchids, their leaves glistening with condensation. She sat on a wicker chair, her sketchbook open on her lap, her pencil moving in quick, furtive strokes. Her bobbed hair fell across her face, hiding her expression, but her shoulders tensed as Poirot approached. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said, his voice soft but firm, "your notebook has become a matter of interest. May I see it?" Clara's hand froze, her eyes darting up like a startled deer. "It's just drawings, Monsieur Poirot, nothing important." Poirot sat across from her, his posture immaculate, his gaze unwavering. "Yet you guard it as if it holds the crown jewels. In a murder investigation, nothing is unimportant. Permit me to see, or I must wonder what you hide." Clara's cheeks flushed, her fingers tightening on the sketchbook. "It's private. Aunt Agatha says I shouldn't show my art to strangers." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "I am no stranger to the truth, mademoiselle. And the truth, I suspect, lies in those pages." Reluctantly, Clara slid the notebook across the table, her hands trembling. Poirot opened it carefully, revealing sketches of the inn's gardens, the gazebo, and the starry sky above Eldridge Hollow. The drawings were skillful, capturing the moody beauty of the place. But as he turned the pages, he found something else. A sketch of Sir Reginald, seated in the lounge, his face stern, a glass of brandy in hand. Beside it, in Clara's looping script, were the words, "He knows too much." Poirot's pulse quickened. "Mademoiselle, what did Sir Reginald know?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "It's not what you think. I overheard him talking to Aunt Agatha in the lounge 2 nights ago. He said something about a scandal, something that could ruin us. I didn't understand it all, but I wrote it down because I was scared." Poirot leaned closer, his voice gentle but probing. "A scandal? Involving you or your aunt?" Clara shook her head, wiping her eyes. "I don't know. Aunt Agatha told me to forget it, but she was so angry with him. I sketched it to make sense of it." Poirot turned another page, finding a rough drawing of the garden door, with a figure in a hooded cloak standing beside it. The figure's face was obscured, but a jeweled dagger glinted in their hand. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "This is no mere sketch." "You saw something, did you not?" Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "I couldn't sleep that night. I looked out my window around midnight and saw someone by the garden door. I didn't see who, but they had the dagger. I thought it was part of Sir Reginald's game, so I drew it." This was a revelation. Clara's window overlooked the garden, placing her as a potential witness to the killer's movements. Poirot pressed gently. "And this figure, man or woman, tall or short?" Clara bit her lip. "I couldn't tell. The cloak hid them, and it was so dark. But they moved quickly, like they didn't want to be seen." Poirot nodded, closing the notebook but keeping it in hand. "You have been most helpful, mademoiselle. Stay close, and speak of this to no one, not even your aunt." Leaving the conservatory, Poirot sought Captain Hastings, who was in the lounge, keeping an eye on the guests. "Hastings, Clara's notebook is a treasure," he said, showing him the sketches. "She saw a cloaked figure with the dagger at midnight, and Sir Reginald spoke of a scandal involving the Vosses. We must learn what he held over them." Hastings whistled softly. "Sounds like blackmail, Poirot, but Clara's just a girl. Surely she's not the killer." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, but her aunt is another matter. Mrs. Voss's anger at Sir Reginald suggests a deeper grudge." Poirot decided to revisit the garden door, hoping to confirm Clara's story. The door, heavy oak with a rusted lock, showed faint scratches around the keyhole, as if someone had fumbled with it in haste. Nearby in the soft earth he found a partial footprint, smaller than the ones from the night of the murder, possibly a woman's. "Another clue," he murmured, sketching it in his notebook. "Someone used this door, perhaps to meet Sir Reginald, or to escape after." Returning to the inn, Poirot overheard a sharp exchange in the hall. Mrs. Voss was scolding Clara, her voice low but fierce. "You foolish girl, what did you tell him?" Clara's reply was tearful. "Nothing, Aunt Agatha. Just about my sketches." Poirot stepped forward, his presence silencing them. "Madame Voss, a moment. Clara's notebook suggests Sir Reginald threatened you with a scandal. What was it?" Mrs. Voss's face hardened, her lorgnette glinting. "You overstep, Poirot. My family's affairs are private. Sir Reginald was a meddler, nothing more." Her defiance only fueled Poirot's suspicion. He recalled the letter from Sir Reginald, offering £2,000 for Clara's education, but demanding discretion. Was Mrs. Voss hiding a family secret, perhaps one tied to Clara's parentage or her own past? He resolved to search their room, suspecting more evidence lay hidden. With Hastings' help, he slipped into the Vosses' suite while they were at lunch. The room was tidy, with Clara's paints and Mrs. Voss's stern wardrobe neatly arranged. Under the bed, Poirot found a locked diary, its leather cover worn. Using another hairpin, he opened it, revealing entries in Mrs. Voss's angular script. One entry, dated a week prior, read, "Reginald threatens to expose the truth about Clara's father. He demands £2,000 to stay silent. I will not yield." Poirot's heart raced. Clara's father, a secret worth killing for. He pocketed the diary, intending to confront Mrs. Voss later. As he left, he noticed a cloak hanging by the door. Dark, hooded, like the one Clara sketched. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "The pieces align." Back in the library, Poirot shared his findings with Hastings. Mrs. Voss had motive. Sir Reginald's blackmail threatened her family. The cloak, the diary, Clara's sketch, all point to her presence in the garden. Hastings frowned. But could she wield a dagger? She's formidable. But murder? Poirot nodded. Desperation makes monsters of us all, mon ami. We must watch her closely. The day waned, the inn still cut off by muddy roads. Poirot felt the weight of time pressing. Mrs. Voss's secret was a key, but other suspects, Lady Victoria, Dr. Beaumont, Harold Trent, still loomed. The cloaked figure, the dagger, the scandal. Each clue tightened the noose. Poirot prepared for dinner, where he would observe Mrs. Voss's every move, ready to unravel the next layer of the killer's mask. Chapter 9. The Reverend's Reflection. The Starfall Inn's dining hall was a cauldron of tension as the guests gathered for another uneasy meal, the air thick with the scent of shepherd's pie and unspoken fears. Hercule Poirot sat at the table's head, his eyes darting from face to face, his little grey cells humming with the weight of new revelations. Mrs. Voss's diary had exposed a blackmail scheme tied to Clara's father, and the cloaked figure in Clara's sketch pointed to a midnight rendezvous at the garden door. Yet one guest remained an enigma. Reverend Elias Thorne, whose quiet demeanour and cryptic comment about Sir Reginald's betrayal nagged at Poirot's instincts. Tonight, he would probe the clergyman's soul. Reverend Thorne sat across from Poirot, his hands folded over his Bible, his mild eyes fixed on his plate. Poirot waited until dessert, plum pudding with brandy sauce, was served before speaking. "Reverend," he said, his voice cutting through the clink of spoons, "you mentioned Sir Reginald felt betrayed. By whom and why?" The room stilled, all eyes on Thorn. He looked up, his face pale but composed. "I spoke in confidence, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald confessed to me in private, as a man of the cloth. He felt someone close had wronged him, but he gave no details." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Yet you were in the library at 2:17 a.m. when the scream was heard. Did you see or hear anything unusual before that?" Thorn's fingers tightened on his Bible. "I was absorbed in my notes. The inn was quiet until that dreadful cry." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And Sir Reginald's journal listed no initials for you, yet you attended his church. Did he seek your counsel often?" Thorn nodded slowly. "He came occasionally, wrestling with guilt over his business dealings. I urged him to make amends." Sensing a thread, Poirot pressed. "Guilt, you say? Did he mention specific sins, perhaps involving blackmail?" Thorn's eyes flickered, but he shook his head. "He spoke in generalities. I cannot break the seal of confession." Poirot noted the evasion, his mind racing. The Reverend's calm was too practiced, his answers too vague. Was he shielding a secret of his own, or protecting another? After dinner, Poirot pulled Captain Hastings into the parlour, where a fire cast long shadows. Hastings, the Reverend knows more than he admits. His talk of betrayal aligns with Mrs. Voss's diary. Sir Reginald was pressing his guests with secrets, but Thorn's reticence suggests a personal stake. Hastings frowned, rubbing his chin. "You think he's involved? A man of God, Poirot." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Even saints have shadows, mon ami. We must search his room." Under the guise of checking the inn's heating, Poirot and Hastings slipped into Thorn's modest quarters on the second floor. The room was sparse. A narrow bed, a desk, a small crucifix on the wall. On the desk lay a sermon draft, its margins filled with scrawled notes. "Forgiveness requires truth, and sin hides in plain sight." Poirot's pulse quickened as he opened a drawer, finding a letter from Sir Reginald, dated 2 weeks prior. It read, "Elias, your advice weighs on me. I cannot undo the past, but I will confront her. Meet me at the inn." The word "her" was underlined twice. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered, showing the letter to Hastings. Sir Reginald planned to confront someone, a woman. Mrs. Voss? Lady Victoria? Hastings scratched his head. Could be either, or someone else entirely. Poirot nodded, pocketing the letter. He noticed a worn prayer book on the bedside table, its pages dog-eared. Flipping through, he found a pressed flower, a rose, like those in the inn's garden, tucked into a passage about redemption. "Curious," he murmured. "A keepsake from the garden, perhaps." Leaving the room, Poirot resolved to observe Thorn at breakfast. But first, he revisited the gazebo, where the murder's threads converged. The evening air was crisp, the stars hidden by clouds. Examining the gazebo's floor, he found a faint scratch, a cross etched with a knife. "A mark of faith?" he mused aloud. "Or a sign left by our Reverend?" Hastings, trailing behind, pointed to a nearby bush. "Look, Poirot, a thread, caught on a thorn." It was coarse, dark wool, like the fabric of Thorn's overcoat. Back inside, Poirot confronted Thorn in the library, where the Reverend sat reading by lamplight. "Reverend, this letter suggests you knew of Sir Reginald's plans to confront a woman. Who was she?" Thorn's face remained serene, but his hands trembled slightly. "I cannot say, Monsieur Poirot. He spoke of a personal matter, one I urged him to resolve peacefully." Poirot held up the wool thread. "And this, from the garden, matches your coat. Were you there, meeting Sir Reginald?" Thorn's calm cracked, his voice low. "I walked the garden earlier that day, praying. I did not see him at midnight." Poirot's mind churned. Thorn's letter, the rose, the wool thread, each hinted at a connection to the garden. Yet his piety seemed genuine. Was he a witness, a conspirator, or something else? The Reverend's talk of betrayal echoed Mrs. Voss's diary. suggesting Sir Reginald's blackmail touched many lives. Poirot thanked Thorn, dismissing him, but his suspicions lingered. As midnight neared, the inn remained sealed by flooded roads, trapping guests and secrets alike. Poirot stood by his window, staring at the dark garden. The cross in the gazebo, the letters Her, Thorn's evasions, all pointed to a confrontation gone deadly. The killer was close, their masks slipping. Poirot resolved to gather all suspects tomorrow, to press them until the truth broke free. Chapter 10. The Truth Unravelled. The Starfall Inn's drawing room was a stage for the final act, its heavy drapes drawn to block the pale morning light, casting the guests in a sombre glow. Hercule Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding the room as the suspects: Lady Victoria Beaumont, Dr. Lionel Beaumont, Harold Trent, Mrs. Agatha Voss, Clara Voss, Reverend Elias Thorne, Mrs. Eleanor Finch, and Jenkins sat in a tense semicircle. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of Sir Reginald Hargrove's murder pressing on every heart. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his face set, ready to act if needed. Poirot's voice, clear and precise, cut through the silence. Mes amis, the time for secrets is over. Today, Hercule Poirot reveals the killer of Sir Reginald Hargrove. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache gleaming under the chandelier. This was no crime of passion, but a calculated act, woven from greed, fear, and betrayal. Let us reconstruct the night of the murder, using the clues: the jeweled dagger, the garden footprints, the torn journal page, the pearl, the key, the cloak, the rose, and the shadow. Each pointed to a web of lies, and now the truth emerges. Poirot began with the journal page, holding it aloft. Sir Reginald listed initials, VB, HT, AV, with sums of money. I first thought blackmail, but it was a ledger of debts he owed. Sir Reginald was bankrupt, his empire crumbling. He invited you all here, not for a game, but to settle scores. He turned to Harold Trent. Monsieur Trent, you claimed the £10,000 was a business loss, but Sir Reginald owed you for a failed stock deal. Your cigarette case in the gazebo placed you in the garden, yet you lied about your whereabouts. Why? Trent's smirk vanished, his hands fidgeting. I was there, yes, to argue about my money, but I didn't kill him. Poirot nodded, moving to Lady Victoria. Madame Beaumont, your pearl in the gazebo and your argument with your husband suggested a secret. Sir Reginald's £5,000 was payment for your theatre, but he demanded favours, perhaps compromising ones. You met him in the garden, did you not? Lady Victoria's face paled, her voice sharp. Yes, I met him to refuse his advances. He was furious, but I left him alive. Dr. Beaumont gripped her hand, his jaw tight, but Poirot waved him off. Your silence protected her, Doctor, but you knew of this meeting. Turning to Mrs. Voss, Poirot's eyes narrowed. Madame Voss, your diary revealed Sir Reginald's threat to expose a scandal about Clara's father, a man not your late husband, but another whose identity would ruin your reputation. The £2,000 was his price for silence. Your cloak matched Clara's sketch, and you were seen near the office, perhaps returning the garden key. Mrs. Voss's lorgnette trembled. I confronted him, yes, to protect Clara, but I didn't strike him. Poirot paused, then faced Clara. Mademoiselle, your notebook showed a cloaked figure with the dagger. You saw someone, but fear of your aunt kept you silent. Your sketches were truthful, yet you hid their meaning. Clara nodded, tears streaming. I saw someone, but I couldn't tell who. Finally, Poirot turned to Reverend Thorne. Reverend, your letter from Sir Reginald spoke of confronting a woman. The rose in your prayer book, the wool thread from your coat, the cross etched in the gazebo, all placed you in the garden. You spoke of his betrayal, but it was yours. Sir Reginald funded your church, but discovered you had misused funds for personal gain. He threatened to expose you, did he not? Thorne's calm shattered, his voice low. He was a hypocrite, judging me while hiding his own sins. Poirot stepped to the centre, his voice rising. Here is the truth. Sir Reginald planned a midnight meeting in the gazebo to confront Reverend Thorne about the embezzlement. Thorne, desperate to protect his reputation, took the dagger from the lounge during dinner, using the garden key stolen from the office. He met Sir Reginald, argued, and in a moment of panic, stabbed him. The scream was not Sir Reginald's, but Thorne's own cry of horror as he realised his deed. He fled, dropping the wool thread and leaving the cross as a subconscious plea for forgiveness. The room gasped, Thorne's face crumpling. No, I didn't mean to. He pushed me too far, Poirot continued, relentless. You returned the key to the lounge, hoping to confuse the trail. The footprints, the pearl, the cigarette case. These were distractions from others' meetings with Sir Reginald, who was pressing them all. Lady Victoria refused his advances. Mrs. Voss rejected his blackmail. Trent demanded his money. But only you, Reverend, had the dagger in hand. Thorne sank to his knees, sobbing. God forgive me. I only wanted to stop him. Hastings moved to restrain him, but Poirot raised a hand. The police will arrive soon, Reverend. Confess to them, as you have to me. The guests sat stunned, Mrs. Finch wiping tears, Clara clinging to her aunt. Lady Victoria buried her face in her husband's shoulder, while Trent lit a cigarette, shaking his head. Poirot addressed the room. The Starfall Inn held many secrets, but none as deadly as a man of faith betrayed by his own weakness. Hercule Poirot has brought order to chaos. He bowed slightly, his work done. As the guests dispersed, the distant sound of a police car broke the silence. The roads were clear at last. The mystery was solved. The killer unmasked. If you've enjoyed this tale, dear viewers, grab a cup of tea and join us for more by subscribing to our channel. Your support means the world to us. Like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Until the next mystery unfolds.